Door coves and adjustable shelves. What the heck are Sawtooth standards? Sliding doors. Let me just jump in here real quick because we haven't covered this. I probably should have done it earlier. You need to be able to move these. Now we have a little bit of a ledge here with this live edge, and we could technically slide it that way, but I don't think that's good enough. We want something that's a little bit more reliable and a place where you know you're supposed to put your fingers. So what I'm gonna try to do is use something like a core box bit. Sometimes the terminology on these bits, I'm not 100% sure what it is, but we're gonna create a little bit of a scoop somewhere in here toward the upper side of the door, because obviously this is on my bench right now. When it's on the floor, you're reaching down to do this, so you don't want it too low. And we're just gonna put that little finger hold somewhere in here, and it should be just enough to get your finger to go. So I'm just gonna mark a start and stop point, and I have a bearing guided bit that's gonna make this cut. We're gonna sneak up on it, because the thing is we have to be super cautious at this point. Whenever you have veneer involved, and you do a routing operation, it's real likely that you're gonna snap that veneer or just pop it off. You have to be super careful. So we're gonna take a series of passes going a little bit deeper and deeper with fence moves, doing both doors at the same time until we get to the full depth. And then hopefully we won't have any disasters with regard to the veneer. So fingers crossed. It's a little bit sketchy, especially on a finished door like this, but it'll be worth it if we get some good finger holds in there. So let's get to it. So the layout for this is going to be 4 inches down and about 10 inches up. That's to taste. You can make it whatever you want it to be. Notice I'm marking on the inside because we're going to do the routing with the show face down. So I need marks.
On your leg.
Seriously, cat. I need marks up here because I'm going to use those marks in conjunction with my fence. And I need to see them. So put a mark here at 4 inches. And we'll set the square for 10. And I'll mark up 10 from the bottom. Now make sure your doors are oriented correctly, right? So if you need to put these back on there just to make sure you have your marks in the same place on both sides, they're going to be mirror images of each other. So just keep that in mind to keep the orientation straight. All right, so I've got my bit in there with the bearing, and what I'm gonna try to do is take small passes and work my way back to the point that the bearing is flush with the fence. So we're a good distance away. I don't care how many passes it takes, I'm just going to take my time. Here's one pencil mark, here's the second pencil mark. So I've got my fence in position, so it kind of represents the outside of the bit. I'm gonna bring one mark in to this part of my fence right here, and then I'm gonna ride all the way down until the other mark hits the other side of the fence, and then I pull away. And then I'm gonna do the same thing on the other door and just keep both of the doors in sync and then move the fence each time. Okay, and here we have our little finger slot there. Looks good, very minimalist. So from a distance, once the finish is on, I think that's what I like the most about integrated pulls and things like that. They just kind of disappear and there's no hardware to look at. So just a very subtle detail along the side. The eye may not even notice it until you're right up on it, just kind of like these pulls here. I think that's a great match for this particular project. So it worked out okay. And we didn't have any trouble with the veneer, so that's good. All right, so next up, we're gonna work on the shelves, or more specifically, we're gonna work on how we're holding the shelves in place. Now, of course, there's a couple different ways you could do this. Shelf pins are the classic way with a series of holes in here and just little pieces of hardware that you put into those holes. Nothing wrong with that, but there is a more classic and I think a little bit more elegant of a way to do this. And on a piece like this, it kind of deserves those little treatments, and that is to do a Sawtooth standard. So imagine a Sawtooth pattern that's cut into this, and you have one in the front, one in the back, and of course on the other side too. And you then take another piece that can go into that dovetailed, partial dovetail shape, just kind of pops into your various locations, and your shelf sits on top of that piece. It's a really cool way to do it. It's a lot of fun to make, but if you go with regular shelf pins, that's totally fine. I just think this way is a little bit cooler. All right, so what I have here are 8 of these. We need 4 per compartment, 8 of these pieces, which I'm going to cut to size so they span from the floor to the ceiling in here. All right, so the fit we're looking for here is you got to be able to get it in there. So if it's a little bit loose, that's okay. Put the gap at the top, rest it on the bottom. You just don't want it to be too tight because it can be really tricky to wedge into position here. All right, so that's looking pretty good. So we just have to cut all 8 of them this way, and then we could work on the sawtooth pattern. All right, so to lay this out, that's kind of what we're gonna do is rely on layout. There's probably more accurate ways you can index and make this work, but I'm only doing 5, so I'm not too worried about it. And I'm gonna cut them all at the same time, so even if there's a little variance between these and their spacing, they'll all be the same on each one of these. So first thing I did was find the center point. Here's my bottom. I'm gonna keep that in mind because I just wanna reference everything from one side, either the top or the bottom. In this case, I think we'll reference everything from the bottom. So this is my center point. And now I'm gonna build out from the center. So each one of these, I mean, there's a lot of different dimensions here that can help you with this. Just depends on how you want to do this. So I've got my center line. I'm going to mark a 1-inch line, which represents the back of the sawtooth pattern. So the center line is going to be one of the shelves. This is actually where the piece is going to sit in there on this flat 90-degree shelf. So that's that one. To get the next point, we have to measure down a 1/2 inch from there. Okay, I'll mark a line. From here, we go 45 degrees until it hits our back line. And then we go from this intersection point straight out to the edge. I know this can get a little bit confusing, so make sure you reference your drawings. You can color that in to show that that's material that's going to get removed. So now we'll just repeat this. We'll go a 1/2 inch down from there, from the shelf we just created. And we hit that 45 again. Then we hit the 90 from this point. Okay, so that's my bottom 2, and we could start to build up from here. So at this point, at our center line, we're going to draw our 45. Okay, then we take another 1/2 inch, send that one all the way back. 45 off of there, take another 1/2. Now, if you want to do more, you can do more, but I really don't think you need to. Now, I'm only doing 5 here, right? So 1 in the center, 2 up, and 2 below. I think this is one of those things that's worth mentioning as many times as possible. You don't really need to have 100 options for where a shelf goes. Most of the time, if the shelf is centered, having maybe 1 or 2 options above and 1 or 2 options below, unless the person has a very specific need, there's just no need to make Swiss cheese of the sides, especially if you're doing regular shelf pins. Just a few in the middle will do fine. So same thing here. You could go all the way up and all the way down, but why? Are we really gonna put a shelf up here? I mean, maybe, depending on what you're gonna do. I know in my mom's house, she's got a very shallow shelf that she uses for placemats in the dining room. So if you wanna customize it to that level, go for it. For me, this is just a regular old shelf, and 5 adjustment points is more than enough. All right, so let's go cut these at the table saw. So here at the table saw, I've got my blade set at 45 degrees. All I'm gonna do is line this bad boy up with my 45-degree line on my marked board here, right there. Then I'm going to use the built-in stop and lock that in place. That's going to allow me to make this 45-degree cut on all of my pieces. And as long as I know, and I marked some of them with bottom just to keep myself straight, I'm going to always put my bottom up against the stop here. That cut should go just fine. I'm doing the bevel first only because I made a test piece and the bevel was done second, and I don't want to touch it because with a saw stop, don't ask me how I know, but you need to be real careful not to angle the blade into your aluminum fence. All right, so here at the bandsaw, we're gonna do a couple of cleanup passes to try to get into that corner. Also keep in mind a hand tool, just a regular handsaw would be fine for something like this. So at the workbench, I'm just gonna clean up everything that I missed here, bringing these 2 lines here essentially to a sharp point. So whatever chisels you have, mortising chisels are pretty good for something like this if you need to really remove a decent amount of material, and a nice wide chisel that gets it all in one shot is also a good idea. So I'll start. Doesn't matter which one you start with, but start with the angle. I'm trying to reference off of the table saw portion of the cut and go down from there. And then now try to sever those fibers coming straight down. Right, and once they come to a point, if you want to, I mean, this might be a little overkill, but you can sand these nice and smooth. Usually, easiest thing I find for this is a card scraper, something that's not too flexible, and then just a piece of sandpaper. We don't want to change the shape, we just want to get rid of scratch marks, blade marks, all that fun stuff. And we get the flat here. All right, so not too much extra effort, but we got to do these on all the rest. Well, pardon the interruption, but if you're a fan of woodworking and British accents, you're gonna love this guild course.
Hi, my name is Philip Morley and I'm a furniture maker in Wimberley, Texas. In this class, we're going to be building this record console. We're going to take a deep dive about lumber core. You're going to be creating your very own lumber core for all the panel work. With that, you'll be learning how to do shop sawn veneer. So we're going to be doing the timbre, which is a really fun little detail to learn how to do. One of the other things that we're going to be doing is making some pulls out of some brass and using some brass ager to get this really nice patina on these pulls. We're going to be talking about how you can make your own unique edge profiles. By combining different router bits, you can come up with something very unique yourself. Some of the things we'll be doing too is dowel construction with this piece. And for the base, we'll be doing some loose mortise and tenon joinery and this little mitered housed joint head. That's a nice little detail. So there's a lot packed into this project, more than enough to challenge everyone that takes this class, no matter what your skill level is. So be sure to check it out at thewoodwhispererguild.com.
Now this course is currently on pre-order, which means it is discounted, and the price goes up on February 9th. So don't delay if you're interested. Head over to thewoodwhispererguild.com and get your pre-order in. So to install these, I'm going to start at the back here, and the reason is because we actually have to notch some of these to get around our frame pieces here. So that notch really doesn't have to be too intense. We just have to notch to the point where it engages with this rabbet, because this standard is actually going to be part of what our back panel rests up against. So we want it to be nice and flush after the notching with this rabbet and the rabbet down here. So I'm just going to take a pencil, and it's going to tell me where that rabbet should start. Down here you don't have to do anything because we're just going to go flush with that surface there. So that's where it starts, and the dimension of that rabbet will be whatever this thickness is here, which should be, what, a ½ inch? Something like that. All right, so we're going to have to do this 1, 2, 3, 4 times. All right, so let's test this first one before we cut the rest of them. What we're going for is flush with this rabbet here. That looks pretty good. And flush with the rabbet down here, which also looks pretty good. All right, so now it's safe to do the rest of them. All right, so I'm going to start attaching these guys. I thought about putting screws in there and attaching them with screws, which is not a bad idea. If you just go screws alone, if you ever need to work on these or replace them, it would be easy to do. I just can't see any reason why I would, or a circumstance that would involve damage enough to these that I would have to replace them in that way. I'm going to glue them in. I don't see any need for screws. So we're just going to apply some glue onto the surface, keep it away from the sawtooth area. I mean, in fact, if you just glued the top and the bottom, you'd probably be fine. Just put glue right along the back there. And once you have the location, use a little clamping action up here. Stay nice and flush. Same thing down at the bottom. Okay, while that sets up, we'll move on to the next one. All right, so at the front, we now have to attach these guys. Now, fortunately, there's no notching. These just get glued right in place. The inside one's super easy. We're just gonna go flush with the inside divider right here. All right, so a little bit of glue on this guy. And bring that up. Okay, 3 clamps should do it. Now on the outer one, we're going to need the help of an adjustable square to index us. So we're going to find the distance back from this surface to one of our dividers, Okay, like that. I'm gonna set the square up nice and tight. Then I can use this to determine where the bottom and the top will go. This one gets just a little bit trickier because you gotta get the clamps in there and you gotta leave yourself some room to be able to adjust this, and also be careful that you don't slip out of position when you add the glue and your clamps. But really, as I look at this, all we need to do is get this to be in line with the joint between the leg and the panel. The drop back depth of this leg happens to be the line that we need to align this bad boy on. So we don't even need a pencil line. Let's double check. Oh yeah. Looking good. All right, so now we'll just do the same thing over on the other compartment. Now, with our standards in place, we can start to think about the shelves. So I'm gonna have one shelf in each compartment, and you could just do a very simple shelf. It's roughly 18 by 18. I'm gonna run the grain from one side to the other, so when you look at it, you're kind of looking at the grain running this way. That makes the most sense to me. But at 18 by 18, you can kind of put it whatever way you like. What I'm gonna do for this is go with something that's like a live edge here. You don't have to. I just happen to have a couple of these pieces from other projects that have that little live edge on there. And I thought it might be neat to have the front of the shelf show that live edge. Now, I don't necessarily want that to be visible all the time because there's already so many competing visual elements to the front of this thing, but I thought it might be neat if you slide a door wide open and you start to see another live edge there. That might be kind of a neat idea. So we'll see what happens. If I don't like it, I could always go with something else. So we're gonna use these. Now, unfortunately, these are not the full width that we need. 18 inches, that's a lot of width, right? So we're gonna need to make that up with something else. So check out what I have here. I actually have some material that's pretty darn wide. It's almost 12 inches in width, and I should have plenty. If I join these two up to make a shelf, and I got enough for two, we should be good to go. All right, so the trick here is we no longer have a straight edge on the front. We have this wavy live edge. So we're gonna have to be careful with how we clamp or how much pressure we apply when we do add those clamps. We're also gonna have to be careful about where our reference surfaces are. So as we cut these, I'm gonna probably be very careful to maintain a square edge and square sides on this backboard so we can continue to use those for reference whenever we need to trim the entire panel to its final size. All right, so let's get to the jointer. Right now, as they're cut, of course, these aren't gonna fit, right? So what I've done is made sure that my side-to-side distance is a little bit less than the total that we have available. So let's say we have 18 available. You want to at least be a 1/16 of an inch short. Everything needs wiggle room for this to actually find its home and be able to go in there. So keep that in mind. And we might even have to trim off a little bit more. I don't know until we actually get into it. So what I'm gonna do is place this guy in here. And I don't necessarily want the shelf to come out any further than these little cleats here, the Sawtooth hangers. If they come out further than that, then we might have an issue where it interferes with the door. So I'm actually I think it looks better for things to be slightly recessed to kind of have a little bit of a reveal. The front of this, I'm gonna have maybe a 1/4 inch behind. This is all to taste, by the way. You could do whatever you like, but you can see down here, I'm a 1/4 inch back, I'm about a 1/4 inch here, and everything's sitting pretty straight. So this is where I'm gonna mark my notch locations. So I'm gonna start at the back and then measure at the front. And this way, if I'm always going from the back to the front, I don't have to contend with measuring anything with the relationship of this wavy edge. But first thing I'm gonna do is put a mark right here to kind of denote where that one is gonna be. And again, you don't necessarily want it to be tight, right? So I'm gonna go in a little bit in from that line. This is not super critical, just for clearance. All right. And now I can replicate those marks here. So these marks aren't gonna mean much to you. Yours is gonna be probably potentially different than mine. So just measure and duplicate them on the other side. Now the shelf on this side, you may wanna double check, but again, because everything is going from the back forward, the back is nice and straight, we should be able to use those same measurements and same setups to make the notches. And the thickness of our standards is 3/4 of an inch, so I'm gonna make sure we have a nice, proud 3/4 of an inch cutout here. By proud, I mean just a little bit over 3/4. And I'm gonna make these cuts here at the bandsaw, just seems like the easiest way to do it. And I've got my marks here set so that 3/4 of an inch, that's gonna be what the fence is gonna provide for us. How far we go in for this cut, I've got that pencil line. And in some cases, because we have to flip this thing around, you may wanna take your pencil lines and wrap them around to the other face, because that may be the only way to easily make this cut, right? So again, the fence guiding the 3/4, and that pencil line just tells us where to stop. All right, let's test it out. And all we're looking for is a loose fit, frankly. You don't want something super snug. We just want to make sure that this is going to sit on the supports on the sides without too much wiggle room, but enough that we can kind of angle it in. It looks pretty good. All right, so let's clean up those corners. All right, so to hang our shelves in these locations, we need small pieces that are cut just to fit into that little angled section there, and this is what our shelves will sit on. So it's just a quick 45-degree cut on each side, and what you're looking for is a fairly snug fit. You don't want it to be too tight, you don't want it to be too loose, but if you have to kind of tap it in, you want that friction fit, because we don't want these to fall out. Right, one on each side, then you grab your shelf, and drop that in place, and the shelf is completely supported in one of the coolest, most elegant ways that you could install a shelf into a compartment. Again, like I said at the beginning, you could do other things. There are certainly other options that will get you to that finish line faster, but I think this is perfect for what we're trying to accomplish here. All right, so that's it. That's the story of the shelves, and next up, I think we need to start working on our top. Next time on The Wood Whisperer. Out of all the things we've done, this might be the easiest thing to do. There's that functionality we were talking about, sliding in front of the drawers.